evening. I'm Earl Butch Graves Jr., CEO at Black Enterprise. Welcome to the latest installment of the Black Enterprise Economic Equity and Racial Justice Town Hall Series, Closing the Wealth Gap. Our topic for this town hall, home ownership and wealth building, creating pathways to lasting Black prosperity. To mark the ongoing racial reckoning birthed from last year's murder of George Floyd, we at Black Enterprise are staying true to our 50-year mission by using our platform to facilitate candid, no-holds-barred conversations, assembling the best minds from business, politics, civil rights, social justice on thought leadership for deep dives on the challenges confronting Black America and devising specific strategies to address them. As the #1 Black digital media brand, reaching more than 8 million unique visitors per month, our virtual programming is like no other, in that we are dissecting these issues through a business lens with a clear, intentional objective. Developing solutions to drive lasting Black economic and financial empowerment. Throughout this year, we will use this series to tackle a range of complex issues that have consistently served to impede the progress of Black America. Topics will include the status of Black business development, opportunities and barriers to quality education, and challenges faced by Black women in corporate America. Today, we are focused on Black home ownership and wealth creation, and the racial divide is staggering. At $171,000, the net worth of a typical white family is roughly 10 times greater than that of a Black family at $17,150. That yawning gap is most clearly reflected in rates of home ownership, the cornerstone of American family wealth. Only 45.1% of Black households own homes, compared to 73.8% of non-Hispanic white households. Worse than where we currently are is where we're headed. According to a report by Prosperity Now and the Institute for Policy Studies, Black family net worth is on track to fall to zero in 2053 if current trends continue. This is clearly unacceptable. This enormous Black-white wealth gap and other economic disparities are clear evidence of the impact of generations of inequality and discrimination, as well as the continuing cycle of diminished access to opportunity. As such, it has always been my contention that if we fix the foundational wealth divide, then Black people will have the means to address those of health, education, digital, business capital, and so many others. This evening's discussion will focus on not just defining the problem, but exploring actionable solutions. What should corporate America, and especially financial institutions, do to demonstrate a true commitment to dismantling systems of inequality and investing in programs to promote wealth and home ownership for African Americans? What can we do to hold government accountable, starting with the Biden-Harris White House and Congress, for their actions or lack thereof toward closing the racial wealth gap as a fundamental issue of equity and inclusion in America? And finally, what should we do in our own households and communities to increase Black home ownership and close the racial wealth gap? We are once again extremely excited to have a 5-star panel to engage in this urgent conversation. This evening's town hall speakers include Operation Hope founder, chairman, and CEO, John Hope Bryant; Freddie Mac Equitable Housing Single-Family Business Vice President, Pam Perry; Walmart Specialty Tax Vice President, Wayne Hamilton; and of course, our dynamic moderator, CNN commentator, attorney, and activist, Bakari Sellers. We also invite you to join this important conversation by sharing your questions and comments via the chat feature. We are once again proud to partner with the Executive Leadership Council, the preeminent global organization focused on developing Black corporate C-suite and board leaders, and our Town Hall Series sponsor. This unique partnership serves as a testament to the power that is realized when two leading Black institutions join forces. Now, before we begin our conversation, we will hear from ELC Board Chair Lloyd W. Brown II, Corporate Community Reinvestment Act Officer for Citigroup. Lloyd?
Thank you, Butch, for that introduction, and thank you, Black Enterprise, for hosting this important discussion. Good evening. My name is Lloyd Brown, and I am the Corporate Community Reinvestment Act Officer and head of the CRA Regulatory Group at Citi. I'm also privileged to serve as the chair of the Board of Directors of the Executive Leadership Council. The ELC is pleased to be the exclusive sponsor of Black Enterprise's Economic Equity and Racial Justice Town Hall Series. Tonight's Town Hall on home ownership and wealth building in our community focus squarely on identifying transformative strategies and implementing measurable solutions to advance home ownership and, by extension, wealth creation that can be passed from generation to generation. This year, the ELC celebrates its 35th anniversary. And since our founding, the ELC has steadfastly advocated for Black leadership at the CEO, C-suite, and board levels in corporate America. Our founders understood that increased corporate opportunities for Black executives was a catalyst for broader economic participation and empowerment for the entire Black community. 35 years later, this critical work continues. Today, the average net worth of Black families is roughly 1/10 of the net worth of the average white family. Black American home ownership is at 45% compared to 74% for white Americans. This discussion is deeply personal to me, not only as chair of the ELC, but first and foremost as an African American and given my role as Corporate Community Reinvestment Act Officer at Citi. I am keenly aware that corporate America is uniquely positioned to facilitate greater access to credit for Black Americans in order to stimulate investment, community development, home ownership, and business ownership. Citi recognizes the vital, unique, and too often overlooked role of the Black consumer in the financial ecosystem. And we at Citi do not take our responsibility to Black consumers, Black investors, Black businesses, or the Black community lightly. In September 2020, Citi committed $1 billion through its Action for Racial Equity initiative to help close the racial wealth gap and increase economic mobility in the United States. Action for Racial Equity is Citi's comprehensive approach to providing greater access to banking and credit in communities of color, increasing investment in Black-owned businesses, expanding home ownership among Black Americans, and advancing anti-racist practices in the financial services industry. For the 3-year period between 2017 and 2019, Citi extended $4 billion of loans to small businesses and $64 billion in mortgages. In addition, we originated $12 billion in community development loans. These initiatives support sustainable, multi-generational wealth creation in the Black community. Citi is not alone in this effort. Many companies, institutions, and individuals have pledged to step up. These are signs of progress beyond the moment into something enduring. We hope tonight's conversation will inspire you to consider how you can impact wealth building within the Black community and encourage others to invest and to take action in support of this important issue for the Black community. Please enjoy this evening's town hall discussion.
Good evening. My name is Bakari Sellers. I'm a CNN political commentator and former member, or the best type of state legislator, as I like to say, a retired state legislator from the great state of South Carolina. And today we're back here with the Black Enterprise Town Hall series. This one is special because we're going to hone in on the racial wealth gap, talking about Black home ownership. And we're looking at it in the context of Black home ownership and wealth building, creating pathways to lasting Black prosperity. One of the statistics that stuck out to me is that about 171,000, that is the net worth of a typical white family in the United States of America. That is 10 times the net worth of African-American families here in the United States. About 45% of African-American individuals own their homes in the United States of America, compared to 73.8% of their white counterparts. Today, we're going to explore this gap in home ownership. We're going to talk about the facts, but with this illustrious panel that we have, we're always really good at diagnosing the problem. What these conversations oftentimes miss are solutions for the future. And so I have Ms. Pam Perry with me today. She's the VP for Equitable Housing, Single Family Business at Freddie Mac. I have Wayne Hamilton, who is the VP of Specialty Tax. He's going to have to explain to me what that is. I did make a C in tax in law school, but he must have that down a little bit better than I. He's over at Walmart. And then, of course, we have just a very special individual friend to us all. I think they call him the conscience of capitalism or something pretty cool like that, something he can embolden and put on his robes as he walks around the house. But we have John Hope Bryant. He's the founder and chairman of Operation Hope. So we have individuals here who have been toiling in the vineyard on this issue for a very, very long period of time. And we want to explore the roles that corporate America and private institutions as well, and the government can play or should play in narrowing this gap that we have just laid out. And so with that being said, I want to say welcome to you all, Ms. Perry, Mr. Bryant, Mr. Hamilton. And Ms. Perry, I just want to start with you, just from a 50,000 foot view. Can you talk about how essential home ownership is to building wealth in this country, and why that is usually the linchpin as we look at any statistics around the attainment of wealth in this country?
Sure, Bakari. Happy to do so. And thank you for having me here today to talk about this important issue. I am really privileged to lead Freddie Mac's equity efforts. We are in the mortgage industry. So we are in the business of putting people in homes and making sure that homeownership is accessible and sustainable to all. Our effectiveness in doing so has been challenged in many ways over the course of the 50 years of Freddie Mac's existence, but we remain focused on the community mission. And with the standing up of my team within the Freddie Mac organization, it really is a deep commitment from Freddie Mac to advance racial equity in housing, because we know that housing serves as the greatest wealth building vehicle for families. And that too holds for Black community. Unfortunately, we as a society have really not fulfilled the mission of the Fair Housing Act and the Equal Credit Opportunity Act in the last 50 years. And so it's incumbent upon us all to really double down on our commitment to advancing homeownership in the Black community. I'm looking at it from the perspective of a few different areas that I view as really impediments or challenges to Black homeownership. I'm looking at barriers to loan qualification, such as what are the loan qualification criteria? What are the barriers and challenges and opportunities to address the lack of down payment assistance, for example? I'm really drilling into the root causes of the homeownership gaps that we're experiencing and looking for opportunities to innovate and effectively to disrupt the system so that it better serves Black communities. One of the things is we do a tremendous amount of industry research, and our research shows that as of January of this year, there are 11 million Black millennials between the ages of 24 and 39, representing 22% of the Black population. This is the very group of individuals who are forming households and who should be aspiring to sustainable homeownership as a wealth creating vehicle. But we also know that there are 3.4 million Black Americans under the age of 45 who have the credit characteristics to qualify for a mortgage today, but they aren't currently mortgage holders. These mortgage-ready borrowers represent a pressing opportunity for all of us. How do we remove the barriers to future homeownership for these millions of Black Americans? It's really imperative that we ensure that Black consumers and families have the community outreach, the financial capability, the wealth building opportunity needed to attain and sustain homeownership. And it's incumbent upon us all. One of the challenges that I'm focused on that's a little bit different, I just wanted to put it out there and add it to the conversation, is there's been a lot of publicity over the course of the last year about gaps in appraisals and potential appraisal disparity. So I just wanted to touch upon that for a moment, since that's an area in which I've spent a lot of time over the last year. Freddie Mac has a unique position in the industry because we have the treasure trove of all data related to mortgages. We have a portal of 50 million appraisals. So I could look up one of your homes and I would see the last 50 years of appraisals on your property. So what we've done recently, in light of a lot of the publicity around Black homeowners or folks in Black neighborhoods not receiving appraisals at what they deem to be a fair value, or even the value which somebody else is willing to buy or sell that home, is we've been mining that data and looking for trends and looking for explanations to see if we can validate what's been reported in the media, and we have been able to, for the most part, and whether we can look at how pervasive are these issues. And it may come as no surprise to any of my fellow panelists, but in fact, we are finding significant gaps in appraisals with no data-driven explanation for those gaps. Our results show that appraised values for homeowners are far lower than contracted sales prices in Black and Latinx neighborhoods. That also these disparities hold true for the race and ethnicity of the homeowner, regardless of whether the homeowner lives in a Black or white neighborhood. So let that sit with you for just a moment. Black neighborhoods, you are likely to receive a lower appraisal than if you lived in a white neighborhood. And if you are a Black homeowner, even if you live in a white neighborhood, the data show that you are more likely to receive an appraisal that is lower in value. So this is just one of the areas in which Freddie Mac is using its thought leadership to both challenge the status quo, challenge the norm of causality, put out into the industry facts. If we can agree upon the facts, then we can begin to really agree upon what are the solutions to, as I like to say, disruption. The system is designed to produce the results that it has produced. If we want different results, we have to redesign the system and root out systemic racism and discrimination that is baked into the system. So on that, I'll just pause and let others weigh in.
John, one of the things that I wanted to ask you was a piggyback on my original question and something Ms. Perry just brought up, which is the system. We talk about laws in this country, redlining, things of that nature, which have been geared towards making it more difficult for African Americans to attain homeownership. She laid out an argument that we've seen recently in the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, these exposés on appraisal prices, et cetera. And she was able to articulate that being a fact and some of the things we have to do to address it. But talk about the systems that we have in place in this country that get the outcome that they're built for, which is to make it more difficult for African Americans to attain a home, and talk about how that difficulty leads to the wealth gap that we see. And then, of course, add on anything you so choose as we kind of lay out this introduction to go forward.
Sure. First of all, thank you, Kari, for all that you do, man. And congratulations on being a wonderful father and a husband and a leader in our community. You don't get nearly the credit you deserve. And I want to say thank you to Pam. And I'll tell her in a minute why I'm saying thank you. And of course, hello to my brother, Wayne Hamilton, who is a quiet storm and a a really important player at Walmart that most people are just not aware of, probably until today. When the CEO of Walmart wanted me to do something with Walmart, it was Wayne that he deputized to run it to ground to make sure that I was real, by the way. This issue of wealth creation started with America itself. I mean, when Americans came over from Britain to found the country, they were given titles, but that really just meant you were a landowner. If you were a governor, that meant you had 20,000 acres or more of land, actually much more than that. If you were a mayor or whoever it was, you were titled, you had land. And the word white was a made up word. We don't have time for this whole story, but basically poor whites came over too. They were given 40 acres per person, whereas we were given 40 acres as a group later on, and that was only 18,000 families. They were given 40 acres per person in the family, that the poor whites. And what happened was when blacks and whites got together and started collaborating and ran away together, when they were caught, they gave the white 2 more years of indentured servitude, gave the blacks life, that became slavery as we know it, and told the white, you're white like us. What the poor white didn't know to ask though, Bakari, was, am I rich like you? Am I wealthy like you? Am I titled like you? Am I a landowner like you? The answer, of course, would have been no. The question was never asked. So we've been sort of chasing our tail, arguing over stupid stuff for 300 years about white and black when the color was always green. Let's fast forward now to the number you gave, which is more than 10 times. Thank you for raising it, of the net worth disparity. Well, she's absolutely right about the statistics. In fact, it's worse than that. In 1930, the federal government participated in it. They created the word redlining because FHA, Federal Housing Authority, would not insure mortgages in black neighborhoods because they were considered to be dangerous. So if you were a bank or a banker, you could be the nicest banker on the planet. But where did you issue a mortgage? You went to issue the mortgage where you thought the federal government would guarantee it. Those were white neighborhoods. So the white neighborhoods got the mortgages and got the transactional of buys and sales, and thus the prices went up. And the black neighborhoods were stuck. So let's fast forward to today. So everything she said is absolutely correct. And yes, there's groundwater effects, and there's all kinds of problems that we need to deal with. But we can also get around these challenges and problems. My mother worked an hourly job at McDonnell Douglas Aircraft, $15 an hour, and a janitor at my elementary school. But my mother bought and sold 7 homes after a divorce from my father in Compton, California, and is now financially independent, lives around the corner from me. And her credit score now is 847. Bakari, I didn't even know it went that high, which means my mother's not black, my mother's green. Whatever my mother wants to get, the answer is yes. The average credit score for black folks today in this country, not poor black people, all black people, is 620. It's really 41% of all black Americans, African Americans, have a credit score of 620 and below, which means you're effectively, Bakari, locked out of the free enterprise system, and you don't even know it. It's what you don't know that you don't know that's killing you, but you think you know. So you think it's racism and bias, which might also be true. But the reality is that the bank won't tell you, I can't approve your loan. And don't even try to get a small business loan, Bakari. That requires a 700 credit score because that's considered risky credit. But a mortgage, really you need to get a decent mortgage, 620. Freddie Mac may do something that's quasi-government or at least backed by the full faith and credit of the government. So it might be more, generous. But generally speaking, you need 620, 650 to get a 680 to get a decent mortgage, 30-year mortgage. So if we're 620, that tells you something about our financial literacy. So let me tell you a source of small inspiration, which I don't think you knew before today. I was thinking about this as we're preparing. When I founded Operation Hope, I didn't own a home. I was 26 years old. I had an apartment. I think it was in Van Nuys, California. And by the time I was 30, I think I owned a modest place, a condo. Then I had 2 rental income properties, one of which my father stayed in because after 54 years in business, he was financially illiterate and made more than he spent and was broke. So I took care of him. So 3 years ago, I started Promise Homes Company, and I now own 700 homes in America, rental homes. I'm the largest minority-controlled owner of single-family rental homes in America, up from nothing, literally, up from Compton, California, South Central LA. And guess who financed a third of my homes? Freddie Mac. So Pam, thank you. Now, it wasn't a hookup. She didn't know me. I didn't know her. I didn't, it was no special whatever, but I had sort of done it all right. So when I got to a point where I needed to access capital at a big level, I mean, here's the funny thing, Bakari. If you want to get one mortgage, you got to sign your life away, personal guarantees, all that stuff. You want to get, so that's 100,000, 300. You want to borrow $35 million, it's non-recourse debt. We don't have time for the details, but basically it's not, there's no personal guarantee on it. It's guaranteed by the assets themselves. So now I have $50 million worth of debt and $125 million worth of real estate. And I only started that company in 2017, Bakari. So while there's a lot of problems and a lot of reasons to be concerned, and I'm about to take that company from 125 million to $1 billion is my goal, be the first person of color to own $1 billion of rental real estate that's residential to our people. There's also reason for hope. Get your credit score up. There's nothing that changes your life more than God or love than moving your credit score 120 points. Once you get to 700, nobody can tell you no. Well, unless they can get sued, lose their job, but they can't tell you no legitimately once you get that. But so there's a lot to unpack here: racism and bias and history and legacy. As recently as the 1970s, bias. As recently, I guess, in last week in the case of appraisals. But there's also a way in for us.
I like that. I like that you left it kind of hanging, and it reminds me of some good pastors I know, because it left me hopeful as well, knowing that there is a way in for us. Wayne, talk about some of the things, first of all, as and maybe I'm wrong, but I do believe that homeownership is the linchpin to closing the wealth gap and attaining wealth in this country. And if I'm wrong, please correct me. But talk about your perch and purview from the private sector, the role that the private sector plays in this. Because some people are they really why Wayne sitting here? What role does he play? I know the answer to that, but I want you to talk about the role that you see the private sector playing in removing that gap.
Gary, it's good to be here, and also along with Pam and John. And part of this is from a private sector. And if we've listened to the Pam and to John, they've described a few things. Number one, there are a lot of things that we need to learn and understand. There are components that go into home ownership. Pam said it best. You need to understand the rules of the game is what she's really describing, how this can change. It's been a deliberate set of policies and laws that have got us to this point. So we're going to have to do a number of things that are just as deliberate to create home ownership. From a private sector, when you look at companies that employ a large number of people, you ask, okay, what can we do? We have 1+ million associates who work in the US. The first step is, how do you, one, create financial stability for people who are working for you? That's part of it. Then the other piece is education. And it's not just throwing a book or sending a link to an article. It's really helping those individuals understand, here's the education, but more importantly, here are the tools. If you talk to John and to Pam long enough, even though you know the rules, it doesn't make a difference if you're not allowed or given an opportunity to apply those rules. So first, it's doing two things. From our perspective as a company, it's financial stability for our associates, our employees. The second thing to think about is the other great way to create wealth is through entrepreneurship. Over the past few years, we've spent quite a number of dollars with the Black-owned businesses, approximately over 2,800. What we're looking at is, how do we take our current capabilities? What do we need to change so that we can engage more Black-owned businesses to create that wealth? The more Black businesses you have, Bakari, you begin to understand it's not only you. The real change is, if I can impact your family, if I can impact the community in which you live, that's where the change is really going to come in. So W-2 money is great, but entrepreneur is faster. And those are two ways that we can leverage as a company, as a private sector. Then it's also our enterprise partners. You partner with organizations. For example, we've partnered with John and his organization to do what we call financial literacy. I prefer to call it education. But at the end of the day, is how do we partner with different organizations to make that happen and use our voice to help become part of the solution and bring the appropriate people to the table.
I mean, all three of you all have given us a lot to chew on, and I want to do some follow up with that. I'm gonna start with you, Pam. I was listening intently, and I believe you're actually still seeing many African Americans be the first in their family to buy a home and go down this path of generational wealth and home ownership. From your perspective, and where you are and where you sit actually in the government, what are some of the things that we can do moving forward to challenge your agency, to challenge members of Congress or whomever it may be, to help remedy some of these things that break down the barriers that you outlined earlier? I mean, we clearly outlined those barriers earlier. And what are some of the things that we should be asking for, or some of the resources we should be asking for that you provide them some may not know? How do we bridge that gap between the good work you do and making sure that my cousin on the street knows that you're there to get his house and make sure that you can help him attain that type of wealth? Because he wants the same discount and hookup that John got. Now, I don't know what John's rate was. I'm about to go find out.
Fabulous. I think I'll defer to others to comment on what the government can and should do. But if it's okay, I'd like to comment on one of John's remarks about credit scores, because it's directly relevant to some of the work on which.
Well, I was going to get to that. So let's go ahead and hash this out, because I think that it's a unique. I think it's a unique racket. And I think that there's a lot of, there are some things in there and some systemic issues in there, John, that we kind of jumped over in the way that credit scores are derived and attained. And so I would just throw that out there to you, but I'm very interested to hear what all three of you all have to say about how we can teach Black folk about gaming the game.
Well, I mean, the reason that I felt compelled to respond to John's comment is, one of the most significant contributors to the lack of credit scores, or the poor strength of credit scores for Blacks in this country, has to do with rental payments. There are 43 million renters in this country whose positive rental payment history is not reported to the credit bureau. So it is not reflected in their credit scores. And our research shows that merely by reporting renters' positive rental payment data to the credit repository, most renters' credit scores immediately jump 60 to 100 points. That's pretty significant. The single biggest expense for most folks is not being reflected in their credit scores. And so it's really the system working against people who are paying their rent on time, year over year over year, to pay other people's mortgages, are not receiving any positive credit for that in terms of building up their credit capability as reflected in the credit score. And that is a significant impediment to homeownership, and it is something that we have the ability to tackle. So in our multifamily business, we have begun requiring the multifamily property owners whose properties we finance, requiring them to report that data to the credit bureaus so that the tenants in those buildings, who are my future homeowners in the single family business, so that they get the bump from paying their rent on time, just as they've been doing month over month, year over year, receiving no credit for it.
John, you wanted to chime in on that. I will also mention that we do know that student loan debt weighs heavily on African Americans, more so than their partners. I pay $2,300 a month in student loans. You see that reflected in your credit score as well. John, you want to chime in as well?
Yeah. So in your example, your student loan is your mortgage. Your student loan is in other words, there's two ways to build wealth: through wealth creation or income creation. So if you're gonna buy a home and you're a postal worker, maybe you don't have an advanced degree, but you can buy a home and you'll build wealth. If you got a college degree, you'll actually earn $1 million or more in income over your working life than you would if you were a high school educated. So if you want to look at it in a way that won't depress you, because it is your mortgage replacement. Let's go back though to what Pam said. I don't want to paper over this, or what you were inferring, which, by the way, is worse than what was been nicely said. First of all, the folks whose mortgages people are paying off are mine because I'm the landlord. So she's completely right. And I tell people the quickest you can get out of as a renter for me, the faster you should. And we, through a company called Isusu, I believe it's called Isusu, it's African gentleman, you know the name, Isusu, brother, cool brother. We contracted with him to report proactively all of the rental payments from our tenants to the credit bureaus for the exact point that she mentioned. It's worse than that, Bakari. Utility bill payments are not reported. Mobile phone payments are not reported. This is unbelievable. Look,
keep the phone on. That's for certain. Everybody keeps their phone on. Let me ask you this, John, while you're going.
Your car insurance. Go ahead.
But you can't. So to be clear, landlords, homeowners, et cetera, can report this. They simply don't. So this isn't a policy fix. This is
it's an education fix.
An education fix.
So it's deeper. Bakari, this is a big one. This is what Operation Hope does at our Hope Inside locations. So the first thing we ask you when you walk in the door, because maybe you don't trust banks, maybe you don't trust government, and you wonder whether you should trust us. Believe having what you hear, none of what you, or having what you hear, none of what you see, or the other way you believe having what you see and none of what you hear. So you're like, okay, what are you gonna do for me? We ask them, can we pull your credit report? Sure. What's that? I don't know. Great. That's called an error. 80 to 90% of people who don't check their credit report have an error on their credit report. We say, can we challenge that for you? Sure. We write a letter with the applicant, this is Operation Hope now, to the 3 credit bureaus, Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax. The law states, Bakari, if they can't confirm that's yours within 30 days, I call this silver rights, they must remove it. That's the law. Do you know that 90% of the time, Bakari, they can't confirm it? And when they remove it, hold on, it's a 40-point pop in your credit score. Boom. So now you get 40 points because of an error that was removed. Then we start working on that charge off from the divorce 10 years ago, where you owed $1,000, but really it got moved around the credit agency, and the last credit agency bought it for 5 cents on the dollar. No, 5 cents on the dollar, that's what it is. So it's really, they bought it for $50, $1,000 face value debt. Yeah. And they're looking for $100. We pay them $200, negotiated. So the borrower got the client got an 80% discount. They got 100% profit. The agreement is they'll remove it from the credit report. That's another 30-point pop. So now you're on 40 points from the error, 30 points from the charge-off removal. You're at 70. You get 30, 40 points from what Pam was talking about rental payments. Now you're up to 100 points. You're in the big leagues now. And you did that without government assistance or a march or protesting. It's just simply applied financial literacy education and a little financial coaching from Operation Hope. The last thing I'll say is when you become this owner of a real estate and you get another piece of real estate to rent, now you become a business owner. And what I've done, Bakari, 65% of all of my vendors, plumbing, electrical, lighting, roofing, painting, etc., are minority, read Black, minority and women vendors. Now, I think that's because I own the company, because I'm intentional about it. And I'm giving free financial literacy education and giving people a chance to rent to own. So when you own the property yourself and you have 2 rentals, you own your own property, 2 rentals, now I think you can be intentional about creating Black wealth for others in your neighborhood by picking who is going to be the plumber and the electrician and the landscaper. All those are living wage jobs and contracts, because most wealth comes from small business, and most jobs are in small business, not with all due respect at Walmart. Education, it cannot be underestimated or understated how powerful that is as a leveler while we're trying to wait for government to also do the necessary right thing on what's called the groundwater effect.
Probably just sharing that.
Wayne, did you want to piggyback on that? Because I also want to talk about corporate accountability and what we should be doing to make sure that other institutions are doing what you and John have laid out. I mean, you guys are mirroring and saying many of the same things. It's the supply chain, it's the vendors, it's creating wealth down the line, which is equally as important. So go ahead and chime in on that, Wayne, if you don't mind.
2 things, and let me talk about the education piece, which is so important. I taught my daughter, who was in dental school, about credit reports and things like that. And she called me one day and said, I need you to get, I need to give you back your credit card. She doesn't have a job. So I'm a little bit curious. I said, well, what happened? She said, my credit score dropped. And I said, please explain. She said, there's something you're doing on your credit card that's causing my credit score to go down. I need to give you back your credit card. Education. She was tracking it.
I had a similar conversation with my wife because we got a joint American Express. It did not go well. I said, don't know what you're doing on your side, but I'm gonna go revisit.
So Bakari, since you give him the credit card, that's exactly what it was. It was an American Express, which gets paid off every month. But she figured out what we were doing. She goes, I know you pay it off, and then she started to give me numbers. And I'm scratching my head. How did my numbers end up on your credit report? The point is, it's about education. It's us taking responsibility for that education. Now flip it to the corporate. It's the same thing. As a company, we're beginning to look at things like this. We've been on a journey through our financial share value network. What can we do? What can we do? We're looking at things like this. It's about the education. It's beginning to talk to companies and the 3 credit bureaus. Can you start reporting these things? Forget the rent for a minute, and that is important. But you said it, Bakari, they keep their phones on. We keep our phones on. So how do we get companies to start taking that responsibility of reporting it? Because the credit score pops. So as I figured out with my daughter, we took off one, the score goes up. So we have to understand, and I think if we pick up on one thing today, is we have to understand what are the rules. We don't spend the time in figuring out the rules. Once you understand the rules, it puts you in a much better position. And we'll underscore when we talk about financial education, financial literacy, is we digest information differently. It's not enough to sometimes send an email. We have an associate who works for the company, and he's in the pharmacy area, and he says every time he hires new pharmacists and techs, he sits down and has a discussion with them. Do you own a home? Well, I'm thinking about, you can't pry, but eventually he gets to a discussion, and he's been able to get associates to buy their first home. They didn't think they could do it. They were trying to save up lots of money. What it is education with a caring person and the right tools will get us where we need to, but we can't do this by ourselves. This is why we keep going. It's a little bit of the Fannie Mae. It's a little bit of the Operation Hope and corporate America and others hand in hand, helping those who need just someone to say, hey, have you thought about this?
Yeah.
Let me throw this out there to you, Ms. Pam, and I know you're about to jump in. I want all of you all to jump in. The Supreme Court has done a lot over the past 2 weeks, but recently one of the things that they did was they just ended the CDC's moratorium on evictions. And we know that that is going to directly affect people that look like the 4 of us on this call. Mm-hmm. So for all 3 of you guys, you have someone who is looking at the end of this moratorium on evictions coming up in the next, 30, 60 days. They're trying to get their self together and in order. They may be a beautician and own their own beauty salon or own their own chair in a beauty salon. They may be a Walmart associate. They may be a government employee. What do you tell that person who is trying to get to the point where they can actually have home ownership? What are some of the concrete steps they should begin to take today going forward on realizing that ultimate dream and putting that linchpin to Black wealth on their side of the chart? So talk to that person today who is looking at this moratorium ending, who has some business sense and savvy, but doesn't know how to get there. What are some of the things you tell them to do? Ms. Pam, you can start, or Wayne, it doesn't.
Sure. I want to echo what my co-panelists have said here today about the importance of financial education. And I like to think of it as, cradle to grave. It's not just about teaching people at that moment in time where they have self-identified, I would like to buy a home. It's about meeting them where they are, wherever they are, at whatever age they are, and helping them build financial capability, regardless of whether they become a homeowner or not. And I honestly think, though, that the problem in our community is that if your parents didn't own a home, how would you have learned about home ownership, about whether you can attain home ownership, or the steps you need to take to get there? And so the reality is we need to start much earlier. We need to start, that the research shows that we should be starting around middle school is when we should be really teaching our children about money. If you don't have money, you tend not to talk to your children about how you get more money. We all know, as middle class or better professionals, I'm sure, all talk to our children about money and the steps they need to take so that they can achieve financial success that we've been able to attain. But you have to teach people all along the spectrum of their lives. One of the other things that I would say is, I look at our financial education curriculum. Freddie Mac has a financial education curriculum called Credit Smart, and it's been out in the market for 20 years. And we recently relaunched it as an app-driven financial education tool that is broken into 22 modules, just in time. Some of those modules are for renters. Some of those modules are for people who are on the brink of home ownership. There are so many different pieces of the education gap that contribute to also a trust gap. If people don't believe that a bank would entertain offering them a mortgage, that becomes a trust issue that doesn't even have anything to do with whether they are financially capable. And so I guess I would say what I assume John will say as well is, get yourself educated. Take advantage of the opportunities to receive financial education from a housing counseling organization, a faith-based organization, community organization, your soror organization, what have you. There are many, many opportunities to kind of up your game in terms of financial literacy and capability. I will just make a plug that Freddie Mac's Credit Smart is available online for free. And so folks should check it out. There may be some modules that are of interest to you that will help start your journey to getting yourselves ready to purchase a home.
Let me just say that my father is, with all due respect to the other men on the call, my father, I would always say, is the smartest man that I've ever met in my life.
As you should.
He did miseducate me, though, along one topic when it deals with financial literacy. And I say miseducate because he was doing his damnedest to educate me in the way that he knew. Mm-hmm. You remember, I'm sure you do, not saying that you're just older than I, but you remember when they used to mail you credit cards?
Yes.
They would just mail you you would just go to the post office.
Yeah.
My dad would take those credit cards and he would cut it up in front of us. Mm-hmm. And my dad always taught us, he said, look, if you can't afford to buy it, then you don't need to have it. Right. And so he was teaching us financial literacy, which trying to understand credit as John is rocking back and forth may not have been the most contextualized way to do that. And so as we're talking to these people out here and trying to re-educate some or educate them, when you're talking to that one person, and let me, Ms. Pam, you made me think about something, cradle to the grave. Let me also push a plug in that individuals our age need to make sure that our parents do not die intestate. We need to make sure that in our communities that people have wills. You call your local lawyer's office, have a will. That is an essential part of building wealth, because you don't need to sell your grandma's house. John.
Yeah, so look, this is real talk. This is probably the most important event I've done in months, because there's good debt and bad debt. The reason I was rocking back and forth is your dad was basically right, but maybe communicating it maybe needed to use 100 words versus 10, because if it's good debt, you want it as much of that as you can get, because that's a mortgage on a house, because the appreciation is all yours. I was in this debate with Roland Martin online about, people arguing, well, no, the bank owns a house. No, you don't know. You own the house unless you default on the mortgage, and they own the debt because you default on it. But if you pay the mortgage, then you own all of the appreciation above the debt. You own the depreciation, which has tax value, and you write off the mortgage payment for 20 of the 30 years because it's tax deductible. There's all kind of benefits of being a homeowner. If you're financing jewelry, then cut up the credit card. So there's bad debt that's depreciating assets, financing depreciating assets, and there's good debt financing appreciating assets. I'm simplifying, but I just want to make it really basic for anybody watching this. Number two, one of the problems that we're having here, Bakari, is Bishop T.D. Jakes told me one day, he said, John, what I do is easy. I'm selling spirituality, love, and good feelings. You're selling turpentine with sugar on it. Everybody wants to spend money. Nobody wants to talk about it in our community. When I did Gayle King's show, mainstream audience in the pandemic, my website crashed, Bakari, for Operation Hope. My website crashed. My website has never crashed in 29 years before that moment because I was talking to mostly our people who didn't quite know what to do with what they were hearing. But when mainstream folks heard there was free financial coaching services, the website crashed. We have got to become as obsessed with this as we are the concert I went to last night for, whatever artist was performing. We have got to we got to make smart sexy. We got to become obsessed with this topic as if our life depends on it, because it does. You joked earlier on, I'm sure you have a great relationship with your wife, but the number one cause of divorce?
Marriage.
Is marriage. Okay. It's money, right? And so this is everything. From the time you get up in the morning to the time you go to bed at night, you're having a financial transaction.
Yes.
When you're asleep, the government didn't finance your pillow. The government didn't finance the sheets you're sitting on. The government didn't finance your telephone. You bought that. It's private sector, but we don't understand money. I call this the third Reconstruction. This is the period from 2020 to 2030, and it's social justice through an economic lens. We've gone through the first Reconstruction after the Civil War. That was freedom from slavery. Then the second Reconstruction, the Civil Rights Movement, that's from the farms to the factories and basic access, becoming the employed to cash the check. Now we got to write the check, Bakari. We got to go from the streets protesting to the business suites, cutting deals and progressing with economic prosperity, social justice through an economic lens, financial literacy for all, wealth creation. I'm doing it through my 1 million Black Business Initiative, and corporate inclusion. And that's why Black enterprise, being basically the Wall Street of the Black community, I think it's going to become more relevant in the next 10 years than it has ever been relevant in the last 50. Because the light's finally on in our community, in our heads. The color's not black or white or red or blue, it's green. It's green. So what do I want people to do, Bakari? Download the Hope in Hand app. It's free. Or go to Fannie Mae. It's free. If you're working at Walmart, go to HR. It's free. Go to operationhope.org. It's free. But stop telling me you can't do it because racism, the boogeyman, or your mama, or your daddy, or Joe, or Jack, because that excuse does not keep you from doing what we're talking about right now, which is take your own life back right now.
If I were just to add to that, Bakari, here's why I appreciate John's point. I've discovered that the people that need the information the most are the most reluctant to ask. I've also discovered that the four of us on this call are sometimes remiss in probing because we either don't want to embarrass someone, and so we don't ask. And what I mean by that is we have to be a little more assertive in asking people, hey, where are you? And take the hit if we have intruded on their privacy. And so what we have to do, as I talked about my daughter, is begin to say, you got to ask questions. And a lot of us are just afraid to do that because we have to admit we don't know. We have to get uncomfortable saying, I just don't know the answer. Can I call someone? And John will tell you, when I first heard about his homes, I was like, so John, how did you do it? I started to quiz him because now, I need to take notes, because if he can do one and that many, I'm asking him now. I'm a tax lawyer by profession, but I'm still asking someone who has done it because I'm not afraid to say, I don't know. So part of solving this problem is not only getting rid of the things placed in our head, is having the courage to go, I need to make a difference, find someone that can help you.
Mhm.
You know, I came into this firmly believing that this was probably the second most pressing issue of our time. I'm a big believer that voting rights is the civil rights issue of our time. But I think that you guys have convinced me. Now, I know you don't win no arguments against Roland. Roland wins every argument he's ever in. But I do think that you guys have convinced me that this is probably 1A or 1B, and equally as important as the issue of our time. And this is something that can be attainable. And you've made it quite, I don't want to say simple, but easy to chew on, understanding that there's some educational things that we need to learn to take control of our own life. As we kind of get near the end of our time together, I want you guys to, and Ms. Pam, you can start. I want you to think about a few tips that you want to leave, or two solid pieces of information that you want to leave individuals with on this home ownership journey, on this wealth building journey. And understanding that I will venture to say a lot of people watching this Black Enterprise telecast probably own a home. They're probably a part of that 43%. So what should they be? What is our responsibility in this, right? And I know Wayne harped on that a little bit, but what are some of the things we can do to help our community come along as well? You probably said the most amazing thing today, Ms. Pam, which is meet people where they are. So let's flesh that out a little bit and see what we can do in your words, if you agree with my sentiment.
Sure. One of my personal passions in this issue is not spoken about that broadly or that widely. It's the environmental justice piece of homeownership. I would like more Black folks to consider not just buying a home, but consider where you choose to buy that home. Obviously, most folks seek to purchase a home in the area most affordable to meet their needs. But there's a lot that we've learned about climate risk in recent years. And, the land in which Black communities were built is the lowest quality land that is most vulnerable to climate risk. And I don't want my life's work, fair lending, and putting more people in homes, closing the Black homeownership gap, which is my mandate to work toward closing the Black homeownership gap. I don't want to put Black people into homes that 30 years from now will not be there or will not be habitable. I would like that expansion of Black homeownership to really be the fulfillment of the Fair Housing Act, which is desegregating. And for the sole reason, not that I have anything against Black communities, but for the sole reason that I don't want Black folks only to consider living in communities that are vulnerable to climate change and lower appreciation of their homes. If you can afford that house or a comparable house in a neighborhood that is on higher ground, safer ground, in a community that is not suffering from the same levels of disinvestment that our communities have suffered, go for those homes. I'll end with that.
Powerful. That's a powerful notion. It's a think outside of the box notion. I like that. Wayne, I'm gonna come to you, and then I'll let John take us to church.
For me, Kari, it is really, the takeaway for me in this work is understanding the ground rules. What can we do individually and collectively to make that happen? And make decisions based on facts rather than folk legend. I also believe now more than ever is engaging partners in solving this problem. Mm-hmm. I think, unfortunately, we will blame Freddie Mac and say they're the ones that can go solve this. I believe we need to figure out as a group, as a people, who do we leverage? Why are we leveraging, with clear and deliberate rules and ideas in place, corporate America can't solve this by itself. That's impossible. So we need to set realistic expectations in there. And most importantly, find people who will challenge your thinking, regardless of how you grew up. For you, Bakari, it was cutting up credit cards. For my dad, it was, I don't know about the stock market thing. And after pressing him, it was like, I just don't understand it.
Mm.
So we all have these things that we have to grow past. It's either how I was brought up, what I was introduced to. We have allowed those things to define our future, where we should have used them as a stepping stone to strengthen us. So as I think about when I walk away from this, and the last piece I'd add is, I was talking to John one day, and he finally says, why do you do this? And he was really probing because he wanted to understand, what was your passion? If you discover someone doesn't have a passion, I think you need to find someone else that does.
Powerful, John.
By the way, Wayne, how much money do you slosh around at Walmart? How much money are you pushing around? Can you tell the people? I'm serious.
I'm responsible for a lot. So my job, I'm responsible for our sales tax, getting the right amounts back to the appropriate governments. I do property tax. It's a few billion.
See, Bakari, it's just a few billion. When you got money like that, you just, yeah. So look, the young lady.
No, they just didn't grab him off the street either to be a tax lawyer and be able to do all of that. Is a special accomplishment, and there aren't many Black tax lawyers. So my hat is off to you as well.
You want to never go broke, become an engineer or a tax lawyer. So tax accountant. So 25-year-old young lady who knows my son. We're in the Bahamas, in the lap of luxury. And she turns to me and says, can I ask you a question? Of course you can. What's a stock? Bakari, what's a stock? She's 25. I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud of you to acknowledge and to admit, versus sitting in ignorant silence, what no one's ever taught you. She said, what's equity? No one ever taught her. Most Black people are not in the stock market. We're not in equities. We're not in home ownership. We're not. So the biggest, to me, travesty of justice, Bakari, other than slavery itself, was the 3 months leading up to the end of the Civil War, January 1865. That was the 40 acres, Field Action 15, given to 18,000 families out of 4 million former slaves. 18,000 families, not 40 acres per person, per family. These were Black Union soldiers. Then the next month came a mule. We know that story, 40 acres and a mule, for those who worked that land, which was on the beach, by the way, talking about environment, Pam. That land was from North Carolina all the way to Miami, 20 miles from the coast. So it was not great land for agriculture. By the way, it's great land today. If we start on to it, right? But we didn't argue about that. We worked that land so hard, they said, my God, they're so industrious, give them a mule. 40 acres and a mule, January, February, 1865. Then comes March 3rd, 1865, the creation of the Freedmen's Bank by Lincoln to teach freed slaves about money. And Lincoln gets killed the next month over the issue you're passionate about, which was promising Black folks his plan to give them the right to vote. And Boone said, that's a bridge too far. You won't live to your next birthday. When he died, the whole vision died about bringing Black people into the free enterprise system. And Frederick Douglass, who we know to be an abolitionist, I know to be a businessman, owned $6 million worth of real estate in Baltimore, Maryland. And there's a plaque on the real estate that he rented. He rented it out to working class Blacks, which gave him the wealth and the income to be an abolitionist and a civil rights leader, which no one talks about. We've gone now you fast forward 160 years almost to today. What's our problem? We don't know in this free enterprise system. Largest economy in the world, we're locked out of. It's offensive to me. It's insulting to me that this 25-year-old girl wasn't taught what a stock was, that we aren't taught how to become proper homeowners. And that's a pathway to wealth, the easiest pathway to wealth creation, that we are, to quote Malcolm X, bamboozled, tricked, fooled out of our own opportunity. The inner cities in America, Bakari, are the last gold mine in America. An inner city in France is called Paris. An inner city in the UK is called London. An inner city in Turkey is called Istanbul. These are centers of wealth because they're centrally located to all transportation, jobs, and opportunity. Where are inner cities? What's South Central LA? What's Harlem? We can go on and on and on. But we aren't buying there. We're fleeing from there. We need to double down. Buy the best house in the worst block in the hood. Rehab it and hold it. Rehab it, rent it. Buy it, rehab it, and hold it. Buy it, rehab it, and rent it, and don't sell it. And I guarantee you, your value will go up, and we will improve the environmental issues through desegregation versus a focus on integration by integrating the money, which is the one memo that we lost somehow. Anybody watching this, you know somebody who makes $60,000 a year or less? Tell them about the EITC. They say, what's that? Say, congratulations, you have a check coming to you. If you make $30,000 a year, you're watching this, and you're working $30,000 a year, you have 3 children, the government owes you $19,000, Bakari, because it's retroactive for 3 years. It's $7,000 a year, retroactive for 3 years if you've never filed. Under the stimulus bill we just passed about financial education, the stimulus bill, if you got 3 kids, the government owes you $3,000 per child, cash. That's $9,000. Plus, there's other things in that bill, but basically you have between $25,000 and $50,000. If you make $25,000, $30,000 a year, that's your money to go put a down payment on a home or start a business. But billions and billions of this dollars just sitting there. We got to go get our money.
Billions of dollars of rental assistance are still sitting out there.
Yes.
There's a huge article about that. We can go on and on and on. This has been, and this is my 3rd or 4th town hall that I've done with Black Enterprise. This has been one of the more engaging, thoughtful, and meatier exercises because it was real. And all of you guys do an amazing job of taking very difficult topics, but allowing us to chew on them and giving us tangible things we can do. And so on behalf of Black Enterprise, myself, Bakari Sellers, Wayne Hamilton, John Hope Bryan, and Pam Perry, we want to say thank you again for joining us at another amazing town hall series. Black Enterprise is actually creating content. That's an important thing. Your 10, 12, 13-year-old kids know about creating content on TikTok and everything else, but Black Enterprise is meeting people where they are. We are creating quality content now that will live forever and ever. And I hope that you share this webinar. I hope you share this town hall with your friends, with your churches, with everyone in your sororities, your links, Jack and Jill, everyone. Ask these folk questions. They're very easy to find. I will see you at our next Black Enterprise Town Hall series. I cannot wait for the next event, and it's challenging me to be a better moderator. I think I'm a lot better today than I was then. I'm more Don Lemon today than I was when we first started. So I appreciate all of you all. Thank you, and God bless you all again for joining us, and have a very, very blessed autumn and fall season.
Thank you all for joining us for this Black Enterprise Economic Equity and Racial Justice Town Hall on homeownership and wealth building. Hi, I'm Derek T. Dingle, Executive Vice President and Chief Content Officer for Black Enterprise. We hope you gained valuable insights and actionable strategies from tonight's virtual experience and will apply them to financially educate and empower yourself and your family, as well as advance our institutions and communities. We would like to thank our dynamic moderator, Bakari Sellers, and all our speakers for their candid, real talk on one of the most important topics that we have discussed today. We would also like to extend our deep appreciation for the investment made by our presenting sponsor, Walmart, participating sponsor, Freddie Mac, and our Town Hall Series sponsor, the Executive Leadership Council. Remember, you and others can engage in on-demand viewings of tonight's program on blackenterprise.com, and we encourage you to share your thoughts and comments on our social media channels using the hashtag #BETownHall. Black Enterprise is the #1 Black digital media brand with more than 8 million monthly unique visitors, and as such, we present continuous content offerings to enhance your business and financial lives. So mark your calendars for our upcoming town hall sessions on education on October 12th, Black women on December 3rd, Black business development on January 13th, and criminal justice reform on February 24th. Also, you don't want to miss our virtual summits. Next week is our Entrepreneur Summit on September 15th and 16th, Women of Power Tech on October 27th and 28th, and Black Men Excel on November 17th and 18th. For more information on our events, go to blackenterprise.com/events. We learned from tonight's conversation that we all have the capacity to build multi-generational wealth. However, in order to develop wealth for life, we must act now. Thank you for joining us, and have a good night.